Greetings, friends, and thank you for coming to this sort of unusual version of our Sunday worship. It's actually a bit odd for me to call this service morning prayer unusual, even though that's accurate for most of us here at St. Gregory's. Until about the mid-20th century, morning prayer was the usual form of worship at most Episcopal churches, with the Eucharist or communion being celebrated only occasionally. There's something appropriate about you all doing so on this July 4th weekend, and especially for it to be entirely lay-led. Let me give you a fun history fact. On the same day that the Continental Congress signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776, they also, unsurprisingly, passed a law making it illegal for churches to continue praying for the king. That was a big problem for Episcopal churches. Because, of course, at that time, the Episcopal Church wasn't the Episcopal Church yet. It was still the Church of England. The King of England was the supreme head of the Church of England, as Charles III is today. This was the established church, the church of the state. You could even think of it as a branch of government. Clergy persons in this church, in fact, had to swear an oath of allegiance to the crown as part of their ordination vows. That made things very complicated for loyal Church of England clergy persons who were living in a British colony one day and the next day suddenly living in an anti-monarchical republic calling itself the United States of America. Many of those clergy decided that they could no longer lead public worship at all, because their choice was either to break the law passed by the Continental Congress or to violate their ordination vows. And that's when laypersons stepped in. They took over leading morning prayer so that public worship could continue until the revolution was settled. There was something refreshingly democratic about that, too. In light of that history, let's all pretend that today's lay-led morning prayer was entirely intentional on my part, and not at all because I failed to find a substitute priest while I was on vacation. Okay? The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, as I'm sure many of you know, has many of our most precious rights enshrined in it. And the very first of these, the very first words of the First Amendment are this: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. That certainly created messiness in those days when the Church of England in this country became the Episcopal Church. But it is something which, as a clergy person in this church, as a priest, and as a baptized Christian, I am most thankful for every July 4. And the reason why is illustrated by today's story about Naaman the general, Elisha the prophet, the enslaved girl, and their two kings. Just to recap that story, Naaman is a great general from the land of Aram, and he has leprosy. The enslaved girl he captured from Israel sees his suffering, and even though she should regard him as her enemy, her compassion moves her to tell Naaman's wife that there is a prophet in Israel who can cure his leprosy. So Naaman's king, wanting to help his general, sends Naaman to the king of Israel with a truckload of money and a letter saying, I'm sending this guy and this money to you so you can cure his leprosy. But the king of Israel, as kings and politicians often do, assumes this is all about him. This must be a trick, a way of picking a fight with him, a ploy to show him up, an insult. This act of mercy so quickly gets absorbed into the twisted world of political egos and face-saving. Elisha the prophet, though, tells the king, "My dude, calm down, chill. I can cure this guy, no problem." So Naaman goes to Elisha's house. Only, Elisha doesn't come out of his house. He doesn't greet the great general. He doesn't come out and make a big, dramatic show of God's power, calling upon all the glory of heaven to come down and heal this great man of his affliction. Instead, Elisha sends his servants out to tell Naaman to go wash 7 times in the Jordan River. "How dare he?" cries the great general. "Where's the show? Where's the calling upon your God's mighty power? Where's the glory of heaven? Bathe in your putrid river? Our rivers are so much better than yours." The great general, as generals and politicians often do, assumes this is all about him. This must be a trick, a way of picking a fight with him, a ploy to show him up, an insult. This act of mercy, as with the king of Israel, so quickly gets absorbed into the twisted world of political egos and face-saving. And just like the compassionate Israelite girl, his own servants, the ordinary people around him, once again save him by saying, "If you'd be willing to do something difficult to be cured, why not do something very simple?" Of course, Elisha was asking him to do something very difficult. I don't think there was anything magical about the Jordan River that cured his leprosy. What finally healed Naaman was doing that most difficult thing of all, getting past his own ego. He had to step outside of that twisted world of political face-saving, even if just long enough to bathe 7 times in a muddy river. Friends, thousands of years later, we are all still subject to these same silly yet inescapable political games. It just happened to us in the recent military conflict. After days of destruction and the deaths of ordinary people, the upheaval of ordinary life, the only thing that stopped war between Iran, Israel, and the United States was when all three could declare that they were the winner. Elisha and the servants are our model for being people of God in the midst of these games. So too is the humble, relational, clear model of ministry outlined by Jesus in Luke's Gospel. Our prophetic and apostolic heritage empowers us not to get caught up in the egoism and face-saving that drives both individual politicians and whole states. Our calling is different, separate, non-established, and yet not disconnected. Ours is a calling to invite others to step outside the egoism of politics and to keep turning our public conversations, the debates, the laws, the policies back to what really matters. What God, our Creator, actually cares about. Compassion, mercy, and the healing and wholeness of real human bodies. God's blessing and mercy be with you all. Amen.